you're vetting out your leader, right? Because there's a lot of people who will say, as they make excuses, do as I say, not as I do. Right. And it's like there's a lot of people and there's plenty of psychopaths out there who are incredibly charismatic, say all the right things, but like Joe and Mike were saying, their lifestyles were not being impacted by the stuff they said. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, it was what follows really there. That's an incredibly important part. It's like if somebody's saying something that you resonate with and you find yourself just attracted to their body of work, it's like, what kind of lives are they living? All right, guys, we're talking about leadership here today. There's a lot of different kinds of leadership out there. There's leadership within authoritative roles within our society, like the president, chief of police, governors, and there's a hierarchy and an order to the way that authority is processed, and the buck stops with the leader. He's making those decisions, so the responsibility falls on him. We'll talk about how you integrate yourself into those roles, but we're also talking about how you become your own leader in your own life, where you're at the driver's seat and you got the wheel in your hands, and how to choose other leaders that make you a better leader, teachers that build your character and that guide you into becoming the leader that you want to make choices because you are in the driver's seat of your own life. So the idea of leadership is a few different topics we're going to carry over into probably another episode or two. And today we're going to talk mostly about how you choose a leader and where leadership begins, obviously in your household with your mom and your dad. They are the beginning leaders of your life, giving you sustenance, and then guiding you hopefully through the rest of your life and to those harder decisions where you need guidance and counsel. And then you will become your own, usually around your teens, you start to decide what you like and what you don't like and what you want to become more like.
It's a huge step. Yeah.
You'll start to choose your own leaders. So I think that's kind of where we wanted to begin, is how do you choose good leaders in your life? Why? And what's the purpose and your attention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
giving
think
your attention to certain people.
To certain people, it's where you start to build yourself in the way that you're choosing. You get control over your life. It's a really unique period. Like sometimes it happens earlier. I think around 13, I started to look at other resources other than mom and dad. Not that I wasn't before then, but I was like consciously going out there and trying to find, different teachers, mostly in the form of music. I remember that's where it really began. I would look for guitar teachers, right? And usually it would be like guys I found on YouTube or something like that, besides our classical guitar teacher. And I began to understand how I'd qualify the teacher, right? Like, because there were some guys who were really good players, right? And you'd watch them and be blown away. But they couldn't elucidate they couldn't talk down to my level.
Right.
It's like they could only talk on the level that they were already on.
Because they're really good. They say that those who can't do teach,
Yep, that's true too.
They have to figure out the minutia of what they're doing, whereas someone who's naturally talented, it's just they don't have words to describe what they do, because what they do is so much more precise than what words can give them.
It's transcendent. But and then there's these other teachers who are maybe not exact, because I do believe those who can't do teach to some degree, because like with entertainment, you got to be lucky. There's a lot of guys who teach that are fantastic. They just didn't find that right vein to get into at the right time. So, but anyway, you find some guitar players who were just wonderful explainers, and they were not good at the guitar, like you were saying. But they could talk about guitar in a way that inspired you, and they talk down to your level, and they could talk down to these, really interesting, difficult places as a player that they ended up helping you. And it was really interesting because
as a teacher, I think that's like their unique skill set, is able to take something complicated and make it like consumable for the average person. But I was thinking about the differences in some of these terms we're talking about, like leader, teacher. I think you could probably add mentor into this as well.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking, would it be worth discussing briefly the differences to how we view them
too?
Yeah,
and how we view them?
The leader is really like, that's a position, and that's a position of responsibility. And then whatever decision you make reflects back onto whoever you're leading, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, the buck falls on you.
Yeah.
and it's a great responsibility. So I think people conflate that with a guiding teacher or a mentor, but that's advice at that point in time. They're
Yeah.
giving you advice on your life. You have the choice whether to go through with that advice or not. When a leader tells you to do something and say, you're out in battle, and they say take troop around, go, you got to do that.
Yeah.
And there's no questions asked
And I think
about
a
that.
lot of leaders, you could say we don't have a choice in them. Like we don't get to choose our parents, and we have to submit to their leadership. A lot of times we don't get to choose our boss. We have to submit to them and whatnot. With politicians, we get to vote on them, but a lot of times we don't have in office the people we voted for, so we have to deal with them as leaders. So yeah, I was thinking it'd be good to just kind of differentiate that, because a lot of times it's like, are you viewing this person online as a leader?
It's kind
And
of
I
like
think
that Bible study where we talked about the difference between trust, belief, and faith, right? There's serious overlap in the terms, but they're distinct.
Yeah.
So that's a good call.
So I would expound on that as, so it was kind of leader, and then teacher, it's just someone you get to opt in on, following their teaching. What you do with it, that's up for that's up to you as well. And then mentor, I think, is kind of that one-on-one leadership you opt into as well.
Right.
So
It's
I don't know.
counsel.
Yeah.
But
Good counsel
I would
from
say
smart people. You're still leading your own life at that point
Yeah.
in time. You're still not saying, do this for me. You're saying, I need some counsel. I need some guidance. Can I learn something here? Yes, no. And then the decision still ends with you leading your own life.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a difference in there. And their counsel and their whatever they're going to relate to you will often change the leadership of your own life.
Right.
So that's, I think, why people kind of conflate the idea that they are leaders, because they are.
Yeah, they are
in a way,
gonna have traits
but you
of it.
still have the choice. Whereas if you're in like a leadership position, like war, you're in the army or something, you don't really
you
have
have
that
a choice. You
You have
do.
a-
You do, you
but it's
can,
more-
but you'll
there's
get
consequences,
court-martialed,
right?
And
Huge consequences.
There's going to be a bunch of backlash unless it's. And Jocko talks about in Extreme Ownership, there is a way to do that properly.
Right.
There is absolutely a way to do that properly. He talks about one
To
story
sort of rebel.
where they have all these buildings and there's no street names and no one knows what anything is, and they have this intel that comes. They'll tell you, okay, they're cleaning out a block, making sure there's no bad guys there, and there's also the guys that are out there with the guns cleaning out the block. They're inside a lot of these buildings, and they'll have to give checkups.
Ooh.
Like, I'm in such and such
Right.
a building at such and such, and they have them all numbered down. And they'll be like, I'm building 21, right? So he got intel saying, oh, it was all cleared. You can release. There's this guy in this window, and he's got a gun, and they don't know who he is. And they're saying, go ahead and blast him, right? And he's thinking,
Could be a friendly.
just has this feeling in his nuts, is just like, this isn't. Let's do one more check, But the guy who was an authority, or his leader, okay, was like, just do it. Like, we don't have time for this. We already did a check. It's already happened. This is a redundant. Just follow my orders. And Jocko had to find a really good way of doing this, which took some effort on his side instead of just being frustrated and a little bitch. And not giving up at the same
What did
time.
he end up
which he could have
doing?
easily
How did he
done.
end up overcoming that? Like so quick, how did he figure that one out?
He was very respectful and kind of stood his ground and said, I really feel like we need to do this. And I really could. It'll just take a minute, It'll just take a moment. Let's just do this.
So he pleaded his case.
He pleaded his case with respect, and the guy was pissed off at him. And they eventually found that guy was actually one of their own. They would have killed him. And there's a lot of that friendly fire kind of going on at the time.
Wow.
And he had just gotten through it, which is why he was so adamant
I
about
remember
going through it again.
I remember in that book they had
That's beautiful. Yeah.
scene he described. They had a all-out firefight between two friendly groups.
All the time.
Shoot.
And
Can
they
you
were-
imagine?
All the time.
and
Happened
it
a
was like
lot.
no one ended up getting hit by the grace of God in that. But it just shows like when two very highly skilled teams are fighting each other, they don't get hit. Like,
It's a miracle.
yeah.
Well, that's why order is so important in leadership is.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to know whose side you're on, and you got to know who your enemy is, especially in those places,
Yeah,
But I think going back to what we were talking about, I think like the mentor and the teacher side of things, that we have complete control over who we allow into that situation. That's where we're talking about today, as far as how do you pick the
here's
right leadership.
Okay, so there's two things that come up when you pick, and this is why I think this generation and the generations that have passed, even with relationships, their level of commitment and devotion are, if they find a teacher and they're committed or devoted to that teacher, they're going to have a lot of the same sort of submission. They should, ideally, if they think that they're a worthy teacher, that like, Jocko would, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when Jesus was just a teacher, the disciples did whatever he said that they should do. They put themselves in submission because his knowledge was such that they wanted to have it. So
That reminds
what
me of
I
like
see
Luke
is-
Skywalker and Yoda, or like wax on, wax
he
off.
was a teacher, but he was also kind of a more profound leader in some ways but it takes somebody submitting themselves to a leader or to a teacher in order to get anything of value out of that person,
knowledge,
right?
yeah.
And many times a mentor will be like, I'm not going to, especially like high guys who are busy with their lives. You want me to be my mentor? It's like, yeah, well, you're going to have to put in the time and effort. They're going to sort of gauge you as a person and be like, are you worth my time? Especially if you're not family or something, and be like, does this person, will they submit to what I tell them to do? Or are they just going to waste my time? So that's a lot of where I see the overlap in leader, mentor, teacher. It's really our response to the terms and what we think we have to do in order to get something of value out of it. If you have a real teacher in your life that's giving you their time, if you would respect their work, you're going to allow yourself to be influenced and changed by their work, which means submission to a certain degree. And that's why there are so many different brackets of leadership. Like there are tons of people out there who will have a teacher, but they'll get nothing from them. And it's because of what they're not putting enough effort in to the relationship. There's no consequences if they leave. The consequences are they're not going to learn, But there are differences, and I think when you begin as a young man, you're going to have sort of a recalcitrance to submission. You're going to have an aversion to saying yes to something you don't completely understand. And then you get that concept of question everything, right? And you should question everything, but a lot of times when you're young, you'll question stuff to the point of not being able to understand it at all, and you're coming from a point of no understanding. So the teacher has to come in and do this, and that's a hard thing to learn. That's kind of what I wanted to talk to about stuff today, because it's a tough subject, man, when you're young and you're choosing leaders, and it formulates who you are down the road in such a profound way. It changes the actual fabric of your being, and it's not something that people talk about in school. It's something that very organically happens. You tend towards certain teachers, but to allow to reinforce to the young guys to make that decision consciously, to self-examine as you're choosing a leader, to say, this leader is going to impact my life. He's going to change who I am, or she is going to change who I am. This is a very serious bond. This is a very serious union I'm making with this person, and I have to and I have to understand that before going into it. And it's going to allow them to actually have a relationship with the teacher, actually have a real mentor, and those people do exist, and those relationships are becoming more and more rare these days for young people because they don't know how to respect a teacher. They don't know how to respect a mentor, and they're just recalcitrant towards leadership in general, because this is a very the humanism in the United States and the West has created a mentality of oneness, like me, 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 me. And you forget that if it's all about you, you're never going to be self-enriched. You're never being enriched by somebody properly. That takes faith because you're coming from a place of no understanding, and that person's going to enrich you. So it takes faith in that person's character. It takes faith in, there's a huge amount of sort of quantization that you're going to go into or should go into when you invite somebody into your life to impact your heart, so the first thing I wanted to talk about when I was younger was these two positions that I came from, and they sort of just black and white scenario, binary. If we were to put leaders into two camps, I want to bring up two words. So there's revenge and then there's justice, right? When you're young, you feel like the world is wrong to you most of the time. To some degree, maybe you're born a certain way with a certain impediment or, disease. Maybe kids at school didn't treat you right, or you came from a poor family, or, take your pick. There's some kind of chip on your shoulder that exists, and the world is at fault. This is common for, I don't know if I've met anybody who doesn't have some kind of a chip on their shoulder, whether they know it or not. It's there. Maybe it's women. Women's a big one for men these days, or whatever. The patriarchy. So when you're young, there's this idea of justice, and you pick a leader that's going to right the wrong, or that has a solution to righting the wrong, right? Who's speaking out against this subject? Who's the one who's holding the torch? Let's find him, because this battle needs to be fought. I've been hurt by it. For Joe and I, it was metal music and just a repulse to the world, right? We choose that genre of music to sort of lead us and feel more sort of like just reinforced in our position. It reinforced our position in the world. And that was towards revenge. So it wasn't balanced. It's like when somebody does you harm, do you put them in prison, or do you go out and kill their whole family? And have like this sort of you overdo the justice and it turns into revenge. And so I started to notice there's different leaders out there, depending on the time of your age, especially, you'll tend towards certain leaders. And like the fascist leader is the leader that goes and tends towards revenge. They want to annihilate, right? And they're very attractive because they're letting that chip on your shoulder feel like you're in the right. You're right. Let's go take care of this completely. These people need to pay, and they're going to pay dearly for it. And then you have the leader that just wants justice, what's fair. He's usually less attractive to the masses because there's no blood feast. There's no blood that lust after. There's none of that stepping on the face, kind of a thing. And he's going to say, well, let's try and help them, right? Or even that. It's going to offend you and be like, no, they don't deserve that or anything like that. It's because he's coming from a higher place than like the fascist leader, like, say, Hitler, right? Hitler's a great example because he's like, we have been screwed over by the world. You have a people with a giant chip off their shoulder, and we're going to dominate the world completely. That's the answer, right? And then you have a leader who's more like Jesus, who's like, we're not dominating the world. We're going to try and save the world, right? Less interesting, less exciting, right? But as
It's a lot less explicit. Hitler and any kind of fascist regime is very explicit and orderly, and that's attractive to someone who wants answers for their own life, to fill that chip in for their own life. So
exactly.
That is very attractive to a lot of people. Plus, they don't have to make the decisions themselves. When you have someone who's looking for justice, it takes much more of a monologue on than a dialogue. And that takes thinking, which is harder to do than just listening and going forth with an emotional response, which is what the fascists are great at delivering.
Exactly.
Well, I think
you
also
nailed it completely. I just want to underline that because when you're dealing in slogans, like what Joe had said, these people who are just so hurt that they don't want to think anymore. They don't want to think of anything other than, a bloodbath.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to hurt your growth. And then that's not a good leader, because a leader or teacher is supposed to make you grow, challenge you.
Right.
And thinking that monologue, that's where a teacher's like Socratic, right? He's going to ask you a question back.
I kind of bring up
what would you do?
Bringing up, I did like Yoda or Mr. Miyagi. Both of these are combat mentors or leaders, you could call them. And they start off with nothing to do with combat. Their students are both bewildered by, like, I'm supposed to be killing people, and here I am waxing your car. Or Yoda's like, I'm out here in your swamp, dude, and like my ship is destroyed, and how am I, this doesn't make any sense, And that's a lot of times the way people are with the good leaders. They don't respect them. They don't know
it
where
doesn't
they come
make
from.
sense. It's like, why am I doing this? And that's where you're coming from, a place of not understanding. And that's why humility is a key element to picking a good leader, because you have to submit.
Well, the leader himself should be able to, if you're going to learn something, you're going to have knowledge. Knowledge is going to give you power, and you have to be responsible with that power. And that's what those leaders are explaining to them in that beginning, is that humbleness that you just said, is not the guy who's going out for bloodlust, but the guy that understands, like Teddy Roosevelt said, carry a big stick and walk softly.
Mm-hmm.
Or like what I think it's called humbleness or meekness was in, if you extract the I forget if it's Jewish or not, but the Hebrew terminology is he who has a sword and keeps it sheathed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the idea of what leadership is. But it's that idea, like when you're talking about being a kid and having this chip off your shoulder, we're always in submission to our parents, to our schools, to the schedules of the world, to learning all these things. We don't realize how important it is to learn all those things. We don't feel like we're a sovereign individual that are making our own choices. So we want to be able to make our own choices. We want to identify ourselves differently, whether you cut your hair a certain way, or you wear certain clothing, or you listen to certain music, right?
The little
to try to make a little
control,
choices,
right?
Little control. And being an adult, you always see they can drive. They can go out and buy things they want. They can go out and they can live their free, quote. But you don't.
They appear free.
They appear free, and that's what you see as being a child, right? So when you get up to that when you get up to being an adult or having those responsibilities, you find, oh, this is a lot tougher than I thought. There's a whole lot more that comes along with being able to have all these freedoms, right? Mm. So I guess that's really what it becomes.
Yeah, if you want to, I kind of see people who choose the right leaders as being an adult in their responsibilities to their mind, body, and soul. And the people who tend towards more of the fascist or like revenge as being children. They want to be given that, routine or that plan that's perfectly laid out. It's like, here's what we will do. Here's what's going to happen. And in many ways, that here's what we're going to do and here's what's going to happen is going to come from the good leader too. But the balance of the way it impacts the world, this is where the self-examination has to come into play. And this is why it starts with yourself. Because it takes a lot of, it's going to be an ugly situation to see where the chips on your shoulder are. And you're going to have to go through a period of just being real with yourself. Like, who am I? What are these things that I'm dealing with? I encourage the young guys to write in a diary because it does not come like really quickly. When I was at that age, I wrote in a diary. I had, like if there was a word that really preoccupied my mind, I'd write that word at the top of a page and I'd just write things at the bottom. And usually something would come out. As we get older, we start to understand in our maturity, like, I'm feeling bad about this something today. There's a reason why. You'll find out if it's like the way you talk to your wife, if it wasn't, paying a bill on time, something like that. It's not just you feel that certain way. So as you're a kid, you have to start to get that mechanism in you and start building that self-examination to be like, well, why do I feel this way with the world? Why does the world make me feel this way? Was it because of my upbringing? Why? Because of my upbringing. What do I have to do to remedy this? How many other people have experienced the same thing? Because that was the biggest one for me, was I didn't feel so alone, right? So I was like, a lot of people experience this. I'm not the only person on the face of the earth who's suffering this sort of way. People have experienced this for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so that process eventually will get you to the point where you can say, all right, I like that leader because he makes me feel not alone in my hurt. But it's not that he's making me so alone in my hurt. It's that I want this hurt to go away. And you don't want those leaders that are just like keeping you hurt, but like a friend while you're just hurting there. You want a leader that's going to ameliorate the damages.
Yeah.
I think you first have to come to, like, I was thinking about what culture pushes us towards. And especially in today's world, it's like, if you grow up, like you say, with the chip on your shoulder, culture pushes us to be victims, essentially, and to just wallow in our victimhood, whether it's your race or your gender. Like, there's something holding you back by society, and you're just supposed to wallow in that and let the government fix it, essentially.
It almost becomes a badge of honor, too.
Yeah. And so I think, like, a couple things, you got to take that, we'll just use the Matrix lens, you got to take the red pill on that and pull yourself out of it, because society, like, you're going to naturally just want to find those leaders. Like, I mean, this happens in politics all the time. The leader uses those crutches, those chips on their shoulder, to push some narrative they want to get elected. Mm-hmm. So they want to right the wrongs for you instead of you taking responsibility and figuring out your own life. They're going to go do it for you. Mm. And that's the nature that we have as humans. Like, we don't want to go to the diet and go to the gym to lose weight. We want to take a pill. Like, we want this stuff done for us. We want to be taken care of cradle to grave, as my dad would say. Like, that's what I think the majority of people want. So you first got unplugged from that mindset.
You have to ask yourself, is that success in my life? Mm-hmm. And as a young man, you're going to find out that
that's a good point.
You're going to come to a point to say, what do I want to do in life? I want to be a trash collector. Okay. I want to start a family. I want a solid, hard days of labor. I want to go home, feel tired. I want to love my wife. I want to go to bed tired. I want to wake up. I want to see my kids. I want to eat breakfast. I want to raise some good human beings, right? or I want to be an artist, right? Whatever it is, find out what that success is, what that purpose is, right? And do it at a young age if you can find out and follow that.
That's the point of
And
this.
some people,
yeah.
like I talked to a fellow this weekend, he's very close. He's Lebanese, I think, and he very strong family, you know. And he was like, "Yeah, you have such a purpose. You know what you want to do." And I was thinking to myself, like, you have something that we don't have here in the West. Like, you actually have a family business. You're integrated into it. Yeah, you have to deal with your uncle and everything, but that's awesome. That is purpose. You know, that's a powerful thing.
The grass is greener, right?
It always is, you know. And so find out what your purpose is, and then find out what success means to you in that domain. I would go and study the people that were successful in music, or in I like philosophers as well, and I would see what their lives were like. I'd open up Wikipedia and I'd see, like, were they married?
Yeah,
Did they have kids?
Definitely.
What was their upbringing like?
Yeah.
Did they have brothers and sisters? Were they
It's
addicted
like the humanity
to
of the person is so important.
Were they alcoholics?
Yeah.
Like what were they like? What was their life like? What created this person?
Even if they just played guitar,
Because I knew that
somehow
they were,
was important.
So what you're doing by doing that is you're researching the person that you know is successful in the area that you want to be successful in, and also gauging their life as if their life successful.
That's right.
For instance, there's a lot of guitar players I loved and musicians that were absolute shit shows in their life. Divorces, alcoholism, just garbage. Like, and I was like, that is horrible. Played some great music, but definitely not going to emulate the rest of this. And that's where a lot of kids, I think, when they're younger, get mixed up. Because they'll see somebody who's very successful in something, and they'll think, let me go emulate their life. Let me go have this train wreck of a life that's been glamorized by social media and Hollywood.
Or
And
just hidden.
Well, a lot of times I think it's glamorized nowadays. But yeah, it is hidden in politics. In politics,
It's
it
like
is.
the
You don't
Jeffrey
know
Epstein.
how
Gets
many
really
drugs.
dark. I don't think anybody's going to emulate.
You don't know how many drugs Joe Biden's on, or you don't know what's going on in the politics. But in Hollywood, I think, in a lot of the arts, that type of lifestyle is glamorized.
Definitely.
It comes
It's a
along with
rock
the terrain.
star.
It's like, you know, and it's very hedonistic. So when you're at that age, do the research and see, does a life line up success-wise with their success within what they do, their
Biographies,
purpose, right?
I think, are huge on
love
reading
biographies.
those.
Yeah.
Like, I learned so much just from reading. I went through Elon Musk's biography. I went through one called, I think it was Bezos' biography, but it was also kind of like the biography of Amazon. It's a little bit of both. Went through Steve Jobs' biography. Like, seeing hyper successful men's lives at an intimate level, and that also helps you see a lot, because you see, like, the downsides of it, like how much effort they put into their business. Like, are you going to do that? Are you going to sleep on a beanbag chair next to your desk, like, and that you literally live at your office like Elon did? Like,
That's why I brought the trash collector, because he's happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the fisherman on the island that has his family.
He
He's
knows
very
what he
happy.
wants.
He knows what he wants, and that's absolutely 100% gilded in steel success to me. It's encrusted in diamonds, and I respect that guy as much as I would an Elon Musk.
And it took self-examination, right? He couldn't take this, like, be number one. These are the guys that get the most attention. This idea of power that the world is like, this is going to give you happiness. He found out what he wanted in himself. What I hear going on here, two different things. First of all, sort of the forensic, you're vetting out your leader, right? Because there's a lot of people who will say, you know, if they make excuses, do as I say, not as I do. Right? And it's like, there's a lot of people and there's plenty of psychopaths out there who are incredibly charismatic, say all the right things, but like Joe and Mike were saying, their lifestyles were not being impacted by the stuff they said. And so it was like, it was what follows really there, you know, and that's an incredibly important part. It's like, if somebody's saying something that you resonate with and you find yourself just attracted to their body of work, it's like, what kind of lives are they living? It's really important. And then the second thing is saying to yourself, what do I want? You know, what do I want out of life to be able to pick a leader? Do I want to be a 14-year-old hateful kid that's angry with the world the rest of my life? You know, do I really want that? Or is that something I'm meant to get over, right? You know, and trying to appropriate your time and your goals and your vision of yourself so that that can actually come to be.
I think rebellion rooted in truth, transcended, becomes renaissance. When rebellion is not rooted in truth, it just becomes chaos, and it dissolves into something that's negative. But if you rebel in something that's truthful, it will lead to a renaissance, like they did in the Dark Ages, right? We've seen this happen in history a couple times, and when you're choosing a leader, there's all these, and that's why the humanity of knowing like what drives a man, because you're bringing up power. It's always been power and success, power and money. That's usually what drives a man. He wants to get the power. He wants to get the money. Money is power in so many ways. And then what is success, though? It's not the power and the money, right? You might think it is, but it isn't. It's how you get money. It's how you get power.
It's what you do with it, too, in the end.
And then what do you do with it?
What are you doing with your power?
Did you affect the community in a positive way? How do your neighbors feel about you? How does your family think about you?
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole lot more than just it's a very much more than just solely thinking about selfishly your own needs.
Yeah.
And
And
then
it's
saying
really complicated these days because the images people put forward on like social media, YouTube, you get this like very narrow snapshot of their lives. It's only what they want to convey. You're only getting what they desire you to see. And you have to look deeper. Sometimes there's not an autobiography. Sometimes there's not a real ability to go in and look at what this person's truly made out of. And that's the point. I have this in my notes. It's kind of the next point is like, there is no perfect leader. There's not, besides Christ, you're not going to find a perfect teacher, leader. Your parents aren't perfect. There's not somebody who's going to check all boxes at all times. That's not going to leave you eventually alienated.
What'd you say? You kept saying perfect.
Perfect,
And
right.
perfect, when you say the word perfect, there's a finality to perfect. Okay? It stops. There's an end. Perfection is an end. It's not ongoing. It's not flowing. Everything that we have is ongoing and flowing. Even the rocks, they keep moving. Everything is in flux and as movement. I think
I would say that is perfect. Right?
Heraclitus said one cannot step into the same river twice. So the idea of perfection, when you think about it from like a biblical standpoint versus what you think about perfection as a word, being a finite word, because it really does mean there's an end. Because if it's perfect, think about it. You change one thing, will it be perfect anymore? No. It's already perfect. You've changed it. It's not perfect any longer. So the idea of like what perfection is in a living term, what it is apparent through God's creation is that it's always changing. It's always movement.
That is perfection, though.
That is perfection.
That's what I don't think perfection's a stagnant term so much as it's like
it's not a static term.
No, I think that it's
but
the
it is
infinite nature of
that
God.
way because of what I said. If you have something that's perfect and you do change something of it, will it be perfect anymore? That's the idea of it.
It's kind of like a impossibility, though. Like you could never have something completely static.
Well, that's why perfection is so wanted and desired, is because it has that finality about it. It's like you've reached the end. It's something like death, There's a finality to perfection.
Yeah, well, that's why I think
that's what's so attractive about it.
I think what's at work there is when somebody sees a leader and they begin to deify them, sort of hero worship, they start to begin to think they can do no wrong. And then when they do wrong, they make excuses for them, and they become like, they're worshiping this person. They're deifying them. And that becomes an issue because one of the things you have to have when you choose a good leader is the ability to take in the good with the bad, right?
Yeah.
You have a good leader, and he may say or do something, and you're not a fanboy. You'll be like, yeah, I call him out for that. I don't completely agree with that. I can be critical about somebody that I love, respect, and I'm in submission to largely for their teaching, but, this is a part of how I learn, is like the Socratic method. Socrates would ask his students something, and they would give him an answer, and he would ask more questions, because he's trying to get at what that student actually means. And what he wanted the student to do is actually to sort of, some of his questions were posed such that they would have to get in an argument with him. And see where they are, sort of find themselves, fight the master for a minute, wrestle with God the way Jacob did, and be able to actually have a monologue of your own, and
right?
Be proud of it. So
that's
really the important part for that I wanted to give some time to before we go into Machiavellian.
No, I was just going to actually bring up a different point, but yeah, I wasn't going to go.
Be able to take the good in with the bad, especially for our Christian listeners, because I feel like there's when I bring up Jordan Peterson in the church, a lot of people be like, he's secular, or he's teetering on the edge. They're really quick to point out like the points that are like, yeah, well, duh. Like, I don't care. That's not the point why I think Jordan Peterson's a
They're
great
fanatics, dude.
Yeah, or like,
it's the way it is.
don't listen to Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens. They're like, you're polluting your mind. There's better stuff to listen to. This stuff is, and I'm like, well, if you want to minister to the Greek, you got to know what the Greek is, right? You have to have some understanding for where this person
But you
is
wouldn't
coming
be viewing
from.
them as leaders of you.
In some ways, they have technical ways of leading. Like Sam Harris is a neuroscientist. When he talks about the brain, absolutely.
Yeah.
When he talks about consciousness and hope and some of these, the vernacular of the Bible that he's secularized, I reject that. I'm not listening to Sam Harris's take on faith. I'll listen to what he has to say on it so I know where he's at and see where he's lacking because I love Sam
I
Harris.
think
and
what you're saying is you have listened to it, but you don't agree with it.
Absolutely, because that's that whole Socratic
you have
thing.
listened to it.
Many times a leader will
You're
sort
not
of
internalizing it. You're not making it a part of who you
Well-
are because you made the choice to say that that's not for me.
Yeah, and that takes maturity though, because like
But the
when
act
a
of
leader,
just of not knowing something, and then in their brilliant mind, and then just not listening to it, I think that's much like the ostrich burying his head in the hole and waiting for everything to go away. Doesn't really fix any problems.
well, I
It's
think
just fear.
not listening to it means that you've listened to it with an open mind. You can't just not listen to it, and I want to say that to make sure the listeners understand that. When Sam Harris talks about faith, I don't just fast forward it. I want to listen to what he has to say about faith. But I understand from his position as an atheist that that's not going to coincide with my biblical point of view. It's not going to coincide with the proper terminology of faith. So I listen to it because I want to know where he's lacking so that because I love him, I want to fill the gap on that if ever I could. Talking to an atheist, I want to know where that vernacular, that nomenclature falls short for them because it does. I have to believe that as a man of faith. But that's taking in the good with the bad, right? That's being able to separate, wheat from the chaff.
Do you think, as far as doing that, I could see where there could end up being potentially a slippery slope as far as when you're taking in the good with the bad, as far as your maturity,
Absolutely.
just in general. It would probably be just in general. Like, I think someone brand new to the faith probably
No.
shouldn't go spend hours
No
listening to
way.
Sam Harris.
Don't do that. No, you're
But then
not
it's like-
equipped for that.
Right.
You're not equipped for that. It's like
No,
some guy.
it's different for everybody.
Here's why I'll agree with you because
for everybody.
this is the same issue I take in the church and why I believe the Iron Disciples, like our Bible study version, is so important because we're not just fragmenting the Bible into a series of verses, that are taken from different places to give somebody a TED talk, something that makes them feel good. We're trying to influence them to work hard, to do the study, to learn the language, to do the stuff that's very not what's happening in church, right?
Well, here's
And
a
so
good example.
if you only have the TED Talk experience, like it'd be like a guy who wants to go climb, some steep face in Yosemite with no rope. And it's like, dude, you shouldn't do that. You're not equipped for that. You don't know what you're gonna go into. So like it happens
But
that
it's okay to go walk and look at the mountain. No one's going to go climb it like an idiot. I mean, maybe a couple of psychos have and died, but most people will look at it and go, wow, there's no way I'm climbing that. Then
Yeah.
go back home and start to learn about it. There's
Well, I
no
mean-
problem with going facing up to the mountain just to see how little you know.
just don't climb it.
A good
You know what I mean?
example
Like,
is like, for instance, a lot of the people from the Eastern Europe, they grew up in Marxist communist rule, and they have been on that dark side for a while. They come to this country, they value freedom a lot. They value the Constitution, they value our rights. Whereas a lot of the people that are born in this country don't. So there's a lot to be said of when Adam and Eve took the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil and ate it. It works both ways. That's all I'm trying to elucidate. And I think you also brought up an important point within what I see a lot of leaders today. There's two roles of leaders, and even in this Prince, this is a great book you all should read, historical. A quick little synopsis on the Prince. Niccolo Machiavelli was in the 1500s. He was working under the Medici reign, and he fell out once the Medicis got kicked out, obviously, and was waiting. Back then, families came in and out of power all the time, and was waiting patiently for them to come back into power to get his position back. Ended up not happening, and then he wrote this book for the next prince to try to get him in again. And this book went out, didn't actually meet the prince.
What was the book
oddly
trying
enough.
to achieve? What was it doing? Like,
Went out. So this book didn't get to the prince. It actually went out into nowhere for 50 years, and then finally someone read it and said this is of value. And they named it a bunch of other things. It finally came out. But this book it talks about politics and how to get power and how to keep power, and the difference between authority with fear and then love, and what the difference is between having people that loved you or having people that feared you, and what it is to tell the truth, having like a religious background. He goes through really politics and the deceitfulness that's going to keep someone into power realistically over people. But what's interesting is that all the rulers have like Medici the Magnificent, or Louis they have these verbois titles for leadership roles, right? And then the peasants and everyone, then he went like dukes and boyars, and it kind of went down. But the idea why I'm bringing that up is because a lot of the leaders nowadays have reversed into TED Talks of what you have seen, which is a lot of people want to feel empowered over their own lives. They just want to be built up. And those slogans and those mantras will do that. But you never saw like Yoda going to Luke Skywalker just going, you're going to be the best. You're going to be the best. You're amazing. Like, it was not that superficial. It was like, you're here to do a job. We got to learn. This is going to be hard. And there's no glamour to it, actually. The glamour is an exodus toward, proletarianism. It's more of a great service and dedication to a role. And I think a lot of the leaders people are looking to are people that are just going to make them feel better.
well, I mean, we have this modern invention called the celebrity. The celebrity is somebody who doesn't really manufacture any depth that the soul can, grow from. It's to make them feel better. That's like the Paris Hilton's, these figures that they don't really add. They have nothing really to add, but you want to have their lifestyle. As a young person, you're like, I wish I could be a person with no skill set and just be revered by everybody, be worshipped by everybody because I have money, because I have this power and influence. But that didn't really exist for a long time. That really wasn't something that existed. So again, that's from a lack of self-examination. Like, do you really want to be a Paris Hilton? Do you really want to have the intelligence of a person who graduated 8th grade, and people just love you because you are who you are? Like, who are you really? And that ends up in this is why you have to look at what you want, and be able to self-examine properly, because celebrities as they are now are very, very watered down examples of what a leader should be, right? They have the capacity to influence people, but their intellect is so diminished that they don't even know how they're impacting or if they're impacting them positively. It's just a negative, selfish endeavor.
Well, it's part of the problem is people get put in, quote, leadership roles because of their status. And that's part of the main problem, too, because I remember like when Taylor Swift was getting criticized because she wasn't commenting on like the election. Yeah. It's like this girl who is just a singer, has this massive fame. Now they're expected to be viewed as leaders on political issues to sway the population one way or another. So it's like, why are you looking to this person to be a leader or someone to emulate? I think is like a big question.
It's a big ploy, man. Like back in the day, your parents would be like, you like her music, but we're not going to go to her for political instruction. You're going to take a math class from, Kim Kardashian? Are you going to go? No, you're not. You're not going to do that. The best that she can do is tell you the best makeup to buy, probably. I mean, I don't want to insult her or anything, but
Horses for courses, right?
The idea is that people are intrigued and attracted to emulate the people they want to become. And that's where you're at when you're 12 years old, 13. You want that lifestyle of somebody that you're seeing. Mm-hmm. You want to be like them. And so you're submitting your clay, as the Bible says, to the hands of those people, right? And so you're being led, you're being influenced. Being led and influenced are two different things, but you have to learn to what degree you're submitting yourself to these different leaders, right? There's people you like Joe Rogan's. I just like the way he's able to be himself. He's a balanced figure who's a great interviewer, but I don't look to him as a leadership position, but I'm influenced by him. A Jordan Peterson, I definitely look at him as a teacher, somebody I submit myself to when I'm listening to his stuff because he's talking over my head all the time. And then there's biblical teachers like that are, your pastor you're in submission to. They know your life so intimately that they're going to tell you stuff about what you should do that has way different impacts than some teacher that's way out there from a book you're reading, right? They know you. There's like a back and forth going on, and you need people in your life that are like that. That was kind of my desire for the younger guys, to find and pray for a mentor or a person in your life that's going to care enough about you to tell you stuff that you need to work on. Eventually that becomes your spouse, right? Your spouse is going to do that for you and sort of be able to help you correct things you can't see. But if you don't have that person in your life, you're on your own. And we have the Holy Spirit for direction. We have all these things, so you need to utilize that to find those people. It takes work. But you have to take in the good with the bad. You have to realize a teacher different from a mentor and position them in, like, am I in submission as a leadership? Is my boss at work? What am I really doing here with this human being? But mostly talking about the people you're seeking out to enrich you, to make you into that man that you want to be. And so that's like, you have to, as a 14-year-old, get into your diary, write, be like, do I want to be a leader? Do I want a family? Do I even know the way I feel about any of these questions at all?
It's all going to evolve anyway. In a lot of those questions.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process, right? It's not like you can just put down on your paper what you want to do, and how you want to do it. That is the struggle of life, is being able to handle that question and know it's constantly going to be evolved. You're going to feel differently towards that question from when you're 15 and when you're 25, and who's steering the ship during that, Is it a Miley Cyrus or Kim Kardashian or, these people with power, or are you really deciding on the food you want to eat? These leaders that are giving you morsels of food, sometimes like some tough gristly steak, or are they just tickling your ears all the time?
Let's talk about how to pick, like, how do you navigate this for young guys? Like, how do you pick good leaders or good teachers of information that you're absorbing every day?
I think it comes down to the Christopher Hitchens talk we had. Like you need to go to what you know first. You need to go to what you know first. So if your family was a Christian family, you're brought up and you went to church every day, but you don't know what the gospel means, it's like you have this false idea what Christianity is. You don't. You have like some sermons in the back of your head and some fragmented verses, but you don't. You don't really know what the gospel is. You don't know what you believe, man. So before you go out and investigate what the Muslim culture is or what New Age is and try and pit them up against your so-called Christianity, read your Bible. Start with the body of knowledge that you have. If it's your morals or ethics, ask where they came from. Where's the things that saved you in your darkest hour, that animated your spirit towards good? What were those things? And study those things to begin with. Don't go to something that's completely outside of yourself, because you've been alive to that point where your consciousness and your experiences from like 0 years old to 14 years old is going to inform you on that decision. And you already know good from bad to a certain degree. You do. There's going to be some experiences you can draw from. It might be a movie. Like for some people, I remember when I was young, Good Will Hunting was a special movie. I watched that and I was like, that seems like me. Not that I'm super smart like Matt Damon in that movie, but like a guy who is dead set on burning his own life on fire. And having somebody in your life to love you enough to be like, you're better than that. Like those figures exist. Go find them. Study that. What's a person that cares about somebody look like? Go find who they are. Find out what they used to get them to that point, and then study that material. But don't go so far outside before you've asked yourself what you've already done and not study the Bible. Like, we have so many friends that come from Christian families, and their kids go through that stage and it's so common. I went through it too. You go out to the New Age, right? There's all this Eastern stuff that sounds really interesting. And you go out into that because there is a lot of interesting, good stuff in it, on the surface. And before I even read the Bible, one time for myself, I went out and did that. And I was criticizing Christianity from a point of ignorance. I did not know what it was about. So study the stuff that you came from, that made you who you are, that's informing and animating the spirit in you, that's good. Give that time. Don't go jumping these huge jumps, because you're going to fall anyway. You're going to learn from your mistakes. You're going to do all of the mess ups either way. But your job as a young person is to try and save your time. Don't make those mistakes if you don't have to. If somebody else did it and you've seen it over and over again, don't do it. Don't do the drugs, alcohol, and all this stuff if you don't have to.
Yeah.
It's not going to do you any good. If you can not have sex until marriage, if you have the discipline to do these things, don't do it. So
don't learn the hard way on everything. And
You
I
don't
think
have
just
to.
look around in your own life too. Like if you got people or like men in your life that you trust, like go to them to ask them where they, what pastor do you like, or where do you get your resources on this? Ask people that you trust in your own life, because God probably put them there for a reason to lead you down those paths.
Respect them.
Rather than just kind of throwing sand at the wall and seeing what sticks. Just start with what you got in front of you.
Yeah. Don't be like the city of Nazareth, who's like, you came from us, so like your dad might be a person full of wisdom, or your uncle. And just because he's so near you, respect him. If he's a man worth respecting and honoring, that's what's the important part for the young people to understand. And I do believe that God cares enough about each and every one of us where he's introducing people into our lives that are going to help us grow if we can make good on those acquaintances, those people. So that's just a good piece of advice. Don't go all the way to Africa to find a bird that's in your front yard.
Yeah. And I think finding leaders or teachers that you can really suss out if they're objective in their views. I think whether this could be politics, religion, whatever. I think and one way to see that is if they admit their wrongs or change their mind, and you can like find that. I think that is a really good tell. Like, because when they're the 10 years ago version of them to now, like stuff should change. Like new things come out. You might have like read the Bible, you studied the Bible more, so you might have had a wrong perception in the past. Like I think seeing people that have changed their views and admit when they were wrong in the past on views shows that they're not dogmatic in what they're doing, but they're more objective and just truth is what they're ultimately after.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And truth is one of those words kind of like perfection, where you have an idea that it's absolute, and it's not. Truth is like that river that's flowing, and we're always encountering more of it.
I would
We
say
should be.
truth itself is absolute. Our perception is what is
The
changing.
idea that truth is
I agree.
absolute. Truth being finite within its perfection of being all knowable is not.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, because I don't want people to get that idea that truth is not or exclusive, because truth is absolute and exclusive. But in that definition, it's expressed in the infinite truth and what God is. He's infinite.
That's
Yeah.
obviously.
So
that's
you
what I
can't
mean
be
by
like, I know the gospel
well, that's the
completely.
dogma that
or
we
I
reach
know.
within doctrine, and with what I think Mike's trying to, elucidate within choosing leaders that can say that they're wrong, in respect and in the search of truth. I think that's powerful, and like what you're saying as well, or you said, don't bleed to feel the pain. You don't have to. 'Cause we stand on the shoulders of giants. Choose your giants.
That's
And
wisdom.
find out whose shoulders they're standing on.
Heck
Because
yeah.
usually you can look through their past. They have a lot of history. And they'll be like, these are the books I read. This is what my dad was like. My uncle was awesome. I didn't have to go to Africa to go see the bird of paradise. He's right at my house. And you can learn about the wisdom that comes along with these successful guys. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to making the best of your time. Because we don't know how long life is. And if the most you can get past, the quickest to get on to the cutting edge, the better, I'd reckon. Not to say the trash collector is not doing his work, but the idea is here that choose your purpose and take it to the end and enjoy it 100%.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's something that's glamorous or not.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the idea, because
Absolutely.
your effect can be great at any one point in time in your life, and don't get consumed in the idea that status is going to give you the proper satisfaction in life, or even give you the ability to influence people in a positive way. You might just be a bitch in power.
That's
which is
right.
what a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And that's not something I subscribe to or hope anyone else will subscribe to.
Yeah. That's true. That's the malevolence of Satan. Like he's giving you this facade, this veneer, and underneath it's just nothing. It's hell. It's a burning lake of fire. And I think a lot of the ways that you, speaking specifically to our Christian audience, is like when you take the time with the Word of God, when you take time with the daily devotions, you are allowing the Spirit to lead you in a way that your day begins, right? So you're starting with that, like our last podcast, your daily devotions, your spiritual food is on point. That's going to inform your discernment and your conscience, so that you're able to make the decisions on the leaders that potentially are in your life already, or some of the more outside of your life, like the books, like Jordan Peterson's and stuff. Like, you're not talking to them; they don't know your life, but make decisions on those people. And then the entertainment figures, these sort of more like joker figures of your life, and all these things. So you need to start with that, because it's where you find your anointing, or where God puts you in life. Like, what are you supposed to do, right? Like, God made us uniquely. God's not just a guy who wastes his time with anything. God is very precise with his decisions and what he does. So you start off with the devotions. You start off with honoring your parents. You start off with the basic stuff in the Bible, where it's like, God, what's your will for my life? And you want him to be like, well, I want you to be a NASCAR driver. It's like, God's like, until you get to that specific nature of, like, we like to say career or something, you need to do what God already laid out in his will. That's plain in the Gospels. He asks you to be a servant, clothe the poor, feed the hungry, spread the gospel. It's all about the harvest. It's about understanding that these people need to be saved.
Yeah, that's why Christ said he who's first will be last. He kind of flipped the script on everybody.
Exactly.
He was like, the meek shall inherit the earth. And he goes through and he's like, oh, this is the way it really is, and it truly will be. So
and that's what makes you a good leader. When
you're choosing your leaders, don't be enamored by status or, material items. Or I'm one of the greatest mentors in my life and John's life. He is a family man. Big family, and he always has people coming, and we stayed with him for years. His son is our great friend, and we're actually almost as, if not better, friends with his dad. It's just hilarious. But he's just one of the finest examples of a human being, of a man, of a father that I've ever seen in my life, ever. And he will always be that guiding force for me. And so don't be enamored by those, or distracted, or kind of taken down to Donkey Island. Mm-hmm. Keep it into perspective, and know that that's the greatest people might be around you.
Yeah, and then the other point that brings up is when you're making the right decisions, and you're in like school, high school, you're around all these other very impressionable sheeple. You guys are those clay balls. You will, and this is where you get strong as a man. This is where ideally you start making the right decisions. You deal with the pushback and the criticisms and the peer pressure and all this stuff coming from your friends, and these people who are saying you're crazy, or you're stupid, or you're not cool, or you're a square, and all these other things. And you get a skin on you, man. You start to grow some rawhide, because if you can't stand up for what you believe in, there's something I see in Christians all the time that I wish I could just shake out of them somehow. They share their testimony. They say what God has done for them, and it's very just flat, bro. It's like flat. And this is the reason why the Andrew Tates and now the Muslim teachers are like becoming more popular, is because it's not flat when they talk about how somebody saved their life. There's fire in their eyes, and there's some, there's this resolve and emphaticness about what happened. And that's because they have a tough skin. They've been torn up a lot. They've subjected themselves to criticism enough to know that they can stand up for what they believe in, despite what they're going to receive from the other people. Being nice in those situations is not the goal. Being truthful in those situations is the goal, because you're already being attacked. If you're already being attacked by somebody for what you believe in, you can't really be nice to them in the way that it's like, well, you're making a testimony at that point. It's like you're standing up in court, man. You're standing up in court against the opposition, and you're giving your reasons at that point in time. And I wish, and as a young man, you got to learn how to do that. It's not like, oh, these friends aren't going to talk to me. It's like, yeah, they might not talk to you, but at least they'll know what you're made out of. At least you'll leave the room with a backbone and some, you're intact.
Your dignity.
Your dignity. Yeah. So these are things that you don't initially know, because it hurts like crazy when you're a young kid and everybody shuns you. Like the devices that kids use and adults use towards each other are brutal. And you need to be able to be under fire for a minute and know.
So you're talking about
out.
We are communal creatures, and you will be in school, you will be in family, you will be in groups of friends, and you will feel that herd instinct. And so you will have to be sovereign at times and treat those people with love, but also be able to know what you were made specifically for and what you were set out to do. And that might not align with what your family or your best friends or whatever the world, we call it, principles and powers and, these giant influences that we have because we are societal creatures and we are quite tribal. And that's where tribalism goes right off the rails. So, yeah, if you want to become a leader, you have to be able to make decisions against odds.
You have to get
and
used
be
to
okay doing that.
Yeah, and this is why the journal is so important too. If you're a person who have faith, right, or you have like a one of those things that people are like, so faith's a big one. Why you want a certain career path's another big one. It's like people are going to be like, well, why? Why do you have faith? Why do you want to be a musician, right? You need to be able to answer. It's like what Peter says, in Peter 3:5, I believe it is. That takes practice. You need to write it out. If somebody asks you why you believe, you can, most often people are like, well, God, Jesus saved my life. You need to be able to get into the nuts and bolts of your testimony and know why you believe, and do the hard work. And that's what makes a good leader, because eventually after you've done that enough, people will learn from that. And hopefully you see your parents do that, with how they can explain very complex, your life, the stuff that's going on that's not just another regurgitation or a cliche response, right? You want to get away from the cliche responses into something that defines you as a unique person in your faith and in your career and stuff like that. That takes hard work. That takes extremely hard work.
If you study the leaders, you'll find they do that quite often.
They do.
They're ostracized by family, ostracized by community for what they believed a lot of times and what they thought was right. So if you're going to, and that is if you want to be that type of leader, you know what I mean? And that is you're going to counter that in your own family. If you're going to lead your own family, you and your wife are going to have to have arguments about things and figure out solutions. And in a group of friends, or you're always going to, this is going to be on some level.
On some level. I'm glad you said that.
You're going to be okay with rejection. You're going to be okay with loving people through that. And it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world.
I would say in many ways, like some of those big time leaders, like say a president or something like that, they have a very weird interaction. They're not with their family as much. They're constantly interfacing with humans in great majorities and great numbers. That is way different than a family man, or like most of our experiences are going to be. But it doesn't mean that those same things aren't at play. Like if you're given a chance to speak about your testimony, like somebody pointedly asked you, hey, why do you believe? Why did you turn Christian? There should be a confidence in you at that moment to explain exactly why, and an excitement to share that with this person if they don't believe, like an excitement, like you just gave me the floor, now it's time. Like a lot of times that's not there for people because they don't really believe, their conversion wasn't really real, and that's how you can self-introspect. Like if I don't have a word for that, or I don't have a expression
I'm
for
going to
that.
play devil's advocate with that, because a lot of people are enticed by very charismatic people who could be selling you a dog shit sandwich just because they have fire in their eyes and they're excited about it. Doesn't mean it's true at all.
No, but that doesn't discount the fact that when it is true, those same things apply. Because I'm not going to let the
I think what you're
psychopath
saying
own
is
it.
that some guys, they need to enjoy that time and they need to take it in for what it is, which is an expression of your story, and they're asking you about you. Therefore, take that on. Take that.
Well, the hypothetical I drew up is when somebody's asking you, because I mean,
Right.
obviously, you're
Well,
not. I don't think you're gonna. There's times where you could, like, when you think about the corner minister, and this is, I know, a great, what is it called? Digression here, but the street minister is just speaking out. Whoever comes and passes by, they want to stand and listen, they can stand and listen. And even though they didn't say, what do you believe? Why standing there and listening, they're asking them just by that little thing. So we say in the Iron Disciples, like, don't go preaching to people, like holding them there, like, you're going to listen to me. That doesn't do anything for anybody. But with every single person in your life, they should know you're a believer. They should know what your testimony is. Eventually, just by virtue of what you do, if not by your expression of the testimony to them individually with a nice story, like something that's actually sort of intimate, they can just see it from your, ideally they see it from your life. but it's not a hidden secret. Like, oh, he really is a Christian? Like, I didn't know that. It shouldn't be like that for most. And
I
that's
don't
where
think there's anything wrong with that either.
well,
Sometimes it can be much more profound.
maybe if
You
you're
see
new to a
somebody who
town,
lives a wonderful life, and then they're not. You beckon the question, and then they tell you. It's nice.
well, I'd say that it is circumstantially, like if somebody's known you for 10 years and they don't know you're a Christian, or known you for 3 years and they don't know you're a Christian, like that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Not like you
Well-
walk into a city, been there for 10 days or, a couple of months. Of course, you're not going to have that. It's when the Spirit leads you, and I think you'll be able to know if you had that response. And this is why you're leading yourself. You're allowing the Spirit to encourage you to do the hard work, to know your purposes and your reasons and have them laid out before you so they're prepared. If it's your career or picking a leader, why do you like Jordan Peterson? What has he done for you in your life? Well, here's why. What did you get from the Prince, the Machiavelli? Well, here's what I got from that book. You have to be prepared to communicate these things. Not that communicating them to people is so important, but that you're doing that for yourself, because that's how you're distinguishing good from bad as you're reading these things, right? You're expressing to yourself, like you do with Ian McGilchrist in the book, how you'll come and talk to me about it. You'll kind of reinforce what's going on and sort of reanalyze it, in real time as you begin to speak it. For a kid, that's important to do. You need to understand, like, why do I like Andrew Tate? Why do I like these figures? Are they giving me entertainment? Are they actually leading me? Am I being honest with these things? And these are the hard questions to ask that will eventually get you to the point of honesty, to know where you stand.
Well,
and if you don't know where you stand, you're never going to stand for anything.
To kind of wrap this up, I think the one last piece I wanted to touch on is how a lot of people will take books and leaders, where they will take all this content, ingest it, and not do anything with it.
Oh, gosh.
And so that's the other side of it too, is like if you're gonna like put the time into leaders, whether it's through books or other content or just teachers, like do what you're learning that's productive. Because I remember I asked this question on a Red Pill panel. It was on Rollo's, one of his podcasts. I did it via Super Chat. Like, I was like, what percentage of your audience do you think is actually like improving their life based on your content, or like actually trying to do that? And they were like, they were kind of thinking like probably it's the minority that are actually doing what they're listening to. And I know that's super common even in the book, like business world. Like these people will just information overload on business books, entrepreneur books, and then do nothing with it. And so that's the other side of it. It's like, if you're putting time in it, if you pick like what you think are good leaders, but you're just sitting there and consuming stuff and not actually doing anything with it, like you got to ask yourself what you're doing.
I totally agree. Knowledge without application is selfish uselessness. And it's kind of like just jagging off.
Totally.
You're not really having sex, dude. Like you're jagging it.
It's so common today.
Yeah,
but
too,
you're
I
not
think.
actually having sex, dude. And if you want to go have sex, go have sex. Don't jack off the porn all day.
Especially
not
with
gonna
like
work. You know
the
what I mean?
podcast world. There's just so much information out there that people are consuming all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you doing anything with it?
Yeah.
It's easier to watch people do what you dream of
Yeah,
than
exactly.
actually
Yeah.
dream it and do it yourself.
You know?
You can say that.
I know.
It's a big one.
It gives off just about as much dopamine. Huberman talked about it. There's a couple studies that are pretty amazing. So, like, if you do find yourself wanting to do something, maybe shut the hell up and do it, and then
Yeah, it's
talk about it after you've done a couple things, and then celebrate it later. Because the idea of celebrating something before you've done it is hedonistic garbage, and you're not going to get anywhere with
Well,
that.
it's like, imagine you spent like the last 6
Agreed.
months reading some books, listening to podcasts on
Yeah.
like productive topics, and you look back and like, did I actually change anything about my life? Like, it's probably a very good question to start asking
Bit of a
yourself.
placebo effect occurring
Yeah.
there. You
Yeah.
know, just because you hear it, just because you
Yeah.
read it, doesn't
You
mean
feel
you've
good kind of about
internalized
it.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's the same thing with, playing music. You have to go out and play live. You play in your bedroom all day long, feel great about that. But unless you play it in front of people, you don't really know what you're made out of.
Mm-hmm.
They used to tell me, remember Dale Rock, he'd go up to us and he'd be like, I think playing live is worth 10 band practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One show live is worth 10 band practices.
Experience.
And it's just your senses are overloaded.
Mhm.
You're actually putting yourself in a position to where you're fully turned on, and that is a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
People like to think about it like,
It's
oh,
just inherently frustrating.
that is so nice to be turned on. No, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, well, it's
You've got-
frustrating because you're overwhelmed by your sensuality. So like your abilities go down just a wee bit.
That's
you know?
why a
Like,
lot of performers take beta blockers, or
Right.
they smoke weed or something. But the idea goes even to, like I brought up, sex. You know, a lot of guys, they want to go and get a relationship, but they don't go out into the world to find women or to talk to. They won't insert themselves in a situation or in someone's presence. And the same thing goes, unless you're a philosopher, you know, or with most things. Knowledge without application is selfish and useless.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, there's like a short circuit in your examination of yourself because, you know, there's this delusion thing going on, and it happens for everybody. You know, everybody's going to encounter this, you know, place where they have to wake themselves up and rattle their cage and engage in challenge, you know, and then as you get older, what happens is, like, when you're young, you're so used to that. You're just being challenged by everything. As you get older and you get established, you really have to continue that. You know, like Mike had said, people who are able to say, well, I've changed my thoughts on that. You know, they're constantly updating. They're going through that process of life, flexible as an infinite creature that God made us. You know, and having that is not easy. You have to really work on it. You have to work on it, and it has to be a daily activity that you start with every single day. And it's not something that you're going to want to do. I mean, that's exactly why it's an issue between entertainment, when you're using knowledge as entertainment, or when you're using knowledge as like, I'm going to utilize this stuff.
Yeah,
And it's
as
like
a
you're
resource.
being honest with yourself at that point. It's like, why do I do this? What's going on? You know, there's times where I have the podcast on and I'm playing guitar. And it's funny because my focus will be in like two different domains. One slightly more than the other, like the guitar. I guess it's kind of like why old people just leave the TV on, because they're like lazy, or like, not lazy, but lonely.
It's a pleasant
right?
distraction.
Pleasant distraction. And so you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's actually going on?
Maybe it's time to go play live at that time.
Exactly.
Maybe you're asking for some more stimulation.
Right.
You know,
Right.
pay attention to those things. Like you said, be wise to those own social cues and your own self, and listen. Listen to that still small voice. Follow the golden thread. And see where it leads you. And just a quick synopsis. So leadership, whether it's an authoritative role in society and some kind of status role where you're in submission to someone, you are in submission to yourself. Ultimately, you will have to learn to lead yourself. Growing up, you will be led by teachers, your parents, firstly, and then you'll start to make decisions on the type of person that you're going to want to be, which are going to encompass teachers that you choose, mentors that you choose, guiding forces that you choose. And then you're going to make the finer decisions, like Mike said. Hopefully you're not going to be bleeding to feel the pain and doing the same retarded shit people do over and over again. Maybe value your time a little bit more and say, I'm going to fast forward past this and make the best use of your time. Don't bleed to feel the pain. You stand on the shoulders of giants, and find out who they stand on, and read those books and get into those biographies and learn about their life. Was their life a success, or was it just a career that was a success? And what do you want out of those things? And then start to pay attention to those little things within you, whether or not you're utilizing and applying your knowledge, or are you just feeding off it for a quick dopamine kick. That dopamine is there to motivate you to do things. That's what it's there for. So get out, act, put yourself in those situations, learn, and then apply what you've learned real time the next time. But don't isolate yourself with just knowledge and do nothing.
Yeah.
And then choose leaders based on that. And it's okay to switch leaders. It's okay to make choices and then to backtrack on them. But also start with the basics, like John said. If you're going to go out and you're going to criticize somebody or criticize something, you better know about it. You better not make a fool of yourself. Like we got made fools of ourselves for talking about Rollo's book. John didn't read it. You know? We've made some serious mistakes on this podcast,
man.
and you have to apologize.
Great.
And
That's what a man does.
that's what a man does, and that makes him all the better for it. And that is a good sign of a leader, when he can apologize and be humble and learn in real time in front of his people. So I think that's anything else you want to add?
No, it's great. And just realize you're young. You're going to, I just want to say this to the young guys. If you feel like, what's it, FOMO, fear of missing out, you know, with the drinking and the parties and whatever, I just want them to know that they're the ones who are missing out. if you're making the right decisions. You'll be so much further ahead. You know, you can socialize in healthy ways. You don't have to miss out on any of it.
No, you can have
You know?
fun. You can go party. You can
Yeah.
do those things.
Yeah, but
I
it's
encourage
just-
kids and people to do that. You need to have a fine
absolutely.
balance.
But it's not the only thing you're preoccupied with doing. You know, and you're not missing out by not doing it 5 nights a week.
And you can do it at any point in your life.
Yeah, it's not. The important thing is to find your discipline and know the truth of what's going on. You know, like the truth is you are defining yourself and you'll have no one to blame when you're standing in front of God's throne someday. So take it seriously.